everybody. Welcome back. I want to take just a couple or 3 minutes and talk about what's going on this fall. I've had a very fruitful summer. I've been just immersed in Barbara Mull's work, and I've been just immersed in writing this book, putting this together, and the last class and this class, and it's gotten a lot deeper for me. You know, my understanding has deepened a lot. This work is all for me, by the way. It's always it's always all for me. And what's very clear to me now is that, in spite of the fact that this book is called An Introduction to Spiritual Consciousness, that if we get what's in this book, if we realize what's in this book, not just memorize it, but realize it, we will have the sufficient consciousness to move into God consciousness at will. But realizing it doesn't come from this class, and it doesn't come from asking questions, although all of this helps. It comes from practicing these principles and the principles at the end. So hard work practice that's necessary if you really want to get free. If you want to get high and have your head in the clouds and stuff like that, that's fine, and this is as good as 100 other books for that. But if you want to get free, this is half the work. Because if you... The truth is that you can't live in God consciousness. You can't take your humanhood into God consciousness. Improving your humanhood is useless. You can't take your humanhood into God consciousness, and you can't take your scripts into God consciousness. So the other half of the work that we're going to be doing around here is the script class. And my understanding of the script work has deepened significantly over the summer. And we're going to go away from 6 months of every other week script and kid together all in a hodgepodge, nobody has any idea what the hell they're doing, to an 8 weekend in a row intensive in which we go through the seven steps of script. And these steps, we'll have flashcards with them, things to carry with us during the week to practice. And these steps, if you practice them, will allow you to get script free, and they will make this truth that we're talking about in this class deeper and deeper and deeper until it becomes part of you and you realize it. So what we're going to be doing for the foreseeable future is we're going to be doing this work and the script work. No kid work. If you want kid work, call Elsie. We're going to be doing script work, and we're going to be doing this work because I know that those two are enough to get free, completely free. We're also going to repeat this class on Friday nights for people that weren't here for this time around with a slightly updated book as a result of the information I got while we did this one. So that's what's going on, and we have only 4 weeks left, and we have 3 chapters left, and so we may not finish. I looked at tonight's chapter is fairly long, so we may not finish. We will get through chapter 7, and that's far enough. Chapter 8 is really a collection of, I don't know, some 30 or 35 spiritual principles from Joel and Robert and Rashneesh in various places, and we can use those as the opening material for the Reaching for the Moon continuation class, which will start on Monday nights, the Monday after Labor Day. No class on Labor Day. So if we don't finish before, we'll do that one, and that one's open to anybody. It's $10 a night donation. Come and go as you please. I'm suggesting that the people that didn't do this class at least read the book, but much more strongly I suggest they come on Friday night, because reading the book isn't going to cut it for you. Reading the book into consciousness helps. But the Friday night book study will probably go on and go on and go on every 2 or 3 times a year, because every time you read this book you'll get it deeper. So if you could do that one again, you can come here on Monday nights to see where we go, and the script work is essential if you want to get free. You need to be script free. You need to not react to anything. So that's what we're doing, and that just gives you a bit of a hint. Now you'll see tonight the front half of this chapter is about the obstacles, and you'll see that there are lots of obstacles and it's very difficult to get free. And what's happened for me is that my intensity's gone way up. See, I have a tremendous advantage because I will be, for the following next 3 months, I'll be doing Pointing at the Moon book study on Friday night, and a script class on Saturday, and a script class on Sunday, and Reaching for the Moon on Monday night, and a meditation on Wednesday night, and a meditation on Sunday night, and going to the 11th step meeting on Thursday night for a meditation. So I will get the benefit. And those of you who are truly greedy will join me on all of those, except the Sunday script class is full, so you'll join me on Fridays, Saturdays, and Mondays, and Wednesdays, and Sundays, and Thursdays. And you won't, but, I would do it if somebody else were teaching, because I'm that greedy. And I've already got a great deal of it. And all it does is make me thirstier. So crank it up, and those who don't keep up won't. And oh well. You notice that this is not like kid work, we don't have frightened kids that are preventing us from being here, and yet we're down to 2/3 on this group after 7 weeks. So it's hard to sustain our focus and our intensity, which is why the script class is much shorter. For those of you who've done the script work before, you haven't done the script work yet. Those of you who've been to the last 2 script classes know it's changed. It's very different now, so keep that in mind when you're making your decisions. And all of this will repeat again in January, so if you decide not to do something this fall, or only one thing this fall, why we'll undoubtedly be doing script and Pointing at the Moon in January. So just turn it off completely. The off switch right there on the left.
This?
Yeah. Good. That means that Adele turned it off. Dulcie over in Phoenix got told at the retreat that she's to stay in Phoenix for 2 years and teach, and her work is to teach Pointing at the Moon. So it's the work. It's the right work to be doing right now. That's what wants to be taught. So she'll be teaching it there, and we'll be teaching it here, and we'll be dumping this stuff into the consciousness, and I'm sure she'll be doing script work there, and we'll be doing script work here. And I will invite her to host a script class from there, a kid class from there, and we can come here and join in on the conference phone as a group if we want to, if she wants to teach it. But I've now separated the work, the script and the kid work, and it's very clear to me that the script work is dealing with truth, just like this is dealing with truth. And the kid work is very experiential. And I didn't have to do the kid work, so I don't have that level of experience on that. So it may be that I'm going to stop doing kid work, teaching kid work entirely, and leave that to Dulcie or 3 or 4 of you who have been so incredibly successful in that work. You may decide that you want to go that way. We'll see how that comes out. I don't know that I'm the best teacher for that. Okay, enough of all that. That's what's happening. Jump in wherever you want to. Tonight we're doing Rising the Mystical Consciousness, which is chapter 6 of this thing. And as I say, we've only got 4 weeks left, so always jump in and ask questions if you've got questions, but I'm going to try to keep it fairly focused so that we don't wander off into the boondocks. I'm more than happy to explain anything in here that isn't explained in depth enough or isn't clear. And so let's stick with what we're reading because we only have 4 more weeks. So let's go, please.
Rising to mystical consciousness. We've already talked about most of the mystical truths that we're going to talk about in this book. Now we get to the question of attainment. Those who've had the mystical experience talk about eternal harmony, oneness, peace, and perfection. Yet we look around the world and we notice that out of the 6 billion people, roughly 6 billion of them are not having the experience.
Yes? Is that what you see? That's what I see.
6 billion minus 1 or 2.
Minus this crowd.
Are not seeing peace and harmony in their lives and do not have any experience of a God in their life. These people believe that God is in their life, but their lives don't show it. On the other hand, Jesus, Buddha, Joel, and many other enlightened masters have demonstrated a consciousness capable of transforming, healing, and showing forth harmony.
Joel made absolutely clear why God is not having a positive effect in the lives of the 6 billion. It's not that God is effective wherever God is, it's omnipresent. It's that God is effective wherever God is realized. We are now in a position to understand that revelation. What it says is that I experience what is when what is in my consciousness. It's really almost trivial when you think about it. When I'm conscious of what is in my consciousness. When I'm not, it's not. And my experience reflects what I'm conscious of.
This is not rocket science. Go ahead, please.
When what is in my consciousness, that is what mind is out picturing as my experience. When I am realizing the presence of what is, I have harmony in my experience, and if you, sitting next to me, are not conscious of the presence of what is, then mind is not expressing harmony in your experience. It's not the truth that sets us free, it's knowing the truth that sets us free. So, if what is not in our experience until we have attained consciousness of it, how do we attain that consciousness?
Okay.
Obstacles. The Bhagavad Gita says that out of 1,000 people, only one seeks, and out of 1,000 seekers, only one attains, which means that 1 in a million attains transcendental consciousness. The good news for us is that the first 1,000 are already by the wayside. We are the seekers. We are already the one. But what the Bhagavad Gita is saying is that out of 1,000 like us, only one will attain. Not very encouraging odds.
That's why I'm doing script on Saturday and script on Sunday and this on Monday and this on Friday and meditation on Wednesday and meditation on Thursday and meditation on Friday and meditation on Sunday.
Because you want to be one.
Yep.
There's another 1,000 that isn't mentioned there. Out of the 1,000 who attain, only one is suddenly struck enlightened without having to do any work. So only 1 in a billion are struck enlightened. It's a very rare thing, not something to count on. The rest of us have to do it the hard way. We have to slog, we have to trudge, we get to play the game in the Leelaa of developing our consciousness from experience to experience, lifetime after lifetime.
So what makes it so difficult? Why is it that only 1 in a million attains? The answer, in a word, is conditioning. By our parents, our schools, our churches, television, movies, books, advertising. Let's go back and look at the emptying out stuff that we talked about in the first chapter.
First, every concept that we have about God is a barrier to attaining transcendental consciousness. If we have a concept that God is anything, we have blocked ourselves completely from spiritual consciousness, because consciousness does not have anything. Consciousness is incorporeal and material, and things are material. So if we have any idea that God is a thing or a person or up there somewhere, we've blocked ourselves.
Also, if we have any of the conditioned concepts that God can give us anything or is withholding anything from us, that God can't fulfill or withdraw, if we have any concept about something that is making decisions about whether we have correctly invoked it to grant our wish, then we have separated ourselves from what is. What is eternal and unchanging. What is consciousness. What is doesn't have anything. What is doesn't have any matter. Matter is in the Leelaa. Matter is in the human consciousness. So if we go to God for something, we're blocking ourselves.
Even the idea of attaining spiritual consciousness is a block. What is has already expressed itself as us, and that expression is full and complete. We already have everything. We already are everything that what is. The idea that we lack something is human. So striving to overcome it keeps us human. We can't transcend human consciousness if we're trying to attain anything.
I'm lacking my glasses.
Okay, you can pass.
Okay. Joel mentions 3 obstacles to attainment. The first is the belief in more than one power, the belief that there is a power other than God, which leads to the belief in good and evil. The belief in good and evil is a barrier. There's just the one consciousness which is eternal and unchanging. Good and evil, good becoming evil, evil becoming good, are not conditions of what is or mind. They are all human concepts, limited concepts, small finite concepts. In fact, the definition of good and evil changes from day to day, from group to group, religion to religion, country to country. The belief in more than one power, or in good and evil, is what makes us human.
Hello? Uh-huh. Okay, well, let me put you back on. Don't need to know what happened. Here you are again. Please go ahead, Kevin.
Go ahead, Jan.
Also, the idea that we can become more spiritual by being good is a barrier. Being good or being bad is completely irrelevant to attaining spiritual consciousness. There's no good, there's no bad, there's just what is. The eternal peace, the eternal perfection, the eternal absence of disharmony. Being a do-gooder will surely keep us from realizing what is, as will thinking we can do evil. This doesn't mean that we don't do anything. As our life unfolds, we may do a lot of good, but it will not be us doing good for the sake of doing good. It will be us having a clear realization of the presence of what is in our life. It will be what is expressing itself as us, and that expression is good. And we may do some evil as well. But it will not be us doing evil, it will be us ignorantly allowing human consciousness to express itself through us. Joel's second obstacle is judging. Judging is an obstacle because what we're judging is an appearance in the Leelaa. It's like judging whether the water in the mirage is hot or cold. Judgment is of the forms in mind, and the forms are not the reality. Judgment keeps us focused on the Leelaa. As far as spiritual attainment is concerned, a good picture is the same as a bad picture. A healthy picture is the same as an unhealthy picture. Either is the thinking the form has existence on its own. When we realize that we're seeing our own concept of the eternal, impersonal expression of what is, we are less inclined to judge.
Joel's third obstacle is self-preservation, the foundation of human consciousness, the conviction that we have to take care of ourselves. We think we have to preserve ourselves against all the others. Unfortunately, the selves that we're trying to preserve are the problem. They're just the material concepts in the Leelaa, false personal senses of the impersonal expressions of what is that we really are. They have to go. Another thing we need to let go of, not suppress, is desire. The desire for anything is an obstacle. You may recall that Patanjali put attraction and aversion on the list of causes for suffering. We might say desire and fear are synonymous with attraction and aversion. If we want something or are afraid of something, we're locked into being human because the desire is for something. The fear is of something. We're stuck in the material world. We're in human consciousness. And the ones that want or fear are our personal senses. This is not a spiritual picture. It's a false material picture. So having everything is an obstacle.
Barbara's 4 lists of everything we love, hate, fear, and desire are lists of things that are tying us to human consciousness. Before we're done, these 4 lists have to be empty. Are we beginning to see now why this is a 1 in 1,000 type thing? Why it's a daunting process? Here's another potential obstacle. As our attachment to human consciousness diminishes and our awareness of truth grows and becomes part of our beliefs, mind reflects it and our humanhood appears to improve. As we realize the presence of what is as the reality of everything and realize that human consciousness has no power, our beliefs change and the picture changes. Perhaps our lack begins to be fulfilled, or we begin to get healthy, or we become employed. When these things happen, we often get complacent and stop focusing on spiritual growth.
It's easy to get sidetracked when our life gets comfortable. Almost nobody starts on the spiritual path because his or her life is perfect, and he or she wants to know why that is. Most seekers are initially seeking human improvement. There's nothing wrong with that. But when their dilemma is resolved, they go back to what they were doing. The problem is that as we drift away from daily work on the content of our consciousness, Joel's protective work, we start hearing human consciousness more and more, and whatever we have gained humanly may begin to disappear. The human life is one of suffering because good things turn bad. Bad things turn good. Healthy bodies turn sick, and sick bodies turn healthy. It just keeps turning over when we're living in the world of duality. This was Buddha's first noble truth. Human life is suffering.
Never underestimate the attraction of the Leelaa. It has infinitely many ways of luring us back into the play. We can get lured into being good, into taking care of our parents or our children, into saving the starving kids in Ethiopia, into promoting world peace. The whole purpose of human consciousness seems to be to make us believe that something in the dream is important. And every time we get distracted, we're away from the spiritual path, and we're remaining on the 999.
Finally, the idea of a personal self, the idea that we are body minds, is an obstacle. One of the things that has to go. There does appear to be a body and a mind here, and that will continue regardless of whether we're in human consciousness or spiritual consciousness. The problem is that we have associated ourselves with these material body minds. We think these body minds are us. When we're having a nightmare, the problem is not that the image of ourselves in the dream is in trouble. The problem is that we've identified with that image, and we believe we're in trouble. The solution to every dream problem is the same. Wake up! Similarly, the problem with this Leelaa is that we are identifying with these material body minds. We're associating with the I thoughts rather than identifying with the I's that we really are. We think we're the body minds, and we're in human consciousness enjoying the rat race.
Let's pause there. Comments?
Did you see that there was a typo on the page before? Do you want me to point that out?
Sure, please.
The end of the first full paragraph, I think so. It says, so having every...
Yes, I did see that. Yes, yeah. Read having any desire. Okay, everybody up with that? You're okay that taking care of your mothers and your children is an obstacle?
But it's an obstacle if we're doing it for anything except the joy of doing it.
Close. When would we have joy in doing it?
We have no attachment to it.
There's no others.
If there's not a payoff to it.
Where does joy come from?
Doing God's will.
From being one with the truth.
From being one with the truth, right. So, you're close. If we're having joy in taking care of our children, but the fact is it's not us that's taking care of our children. If we're having joy, it's God taking care of our children as us. God as us taking care of our children. So if I'm taking care of my kids for any reason at all, I'm locked into the idea that I'm little I, okay? I think I'm separate, and I think I'm doing something, and I think I'm having an effect, even if I'm taking care of my dying mother. But this body may well be taking care of my dying mother.
So you just have to ask yourself then why you're taking care of that person. If you're doing it out of resistance behavior, out of script, then it's the little lie.
Yeah. If it's what's happening, it's what's happening, you know. I just want you to see that if I have the motivation that what motivation could I have for taking care of my mother that would not lock me into humanhood? If I think I'm being good, if I think I'm taking care of her, being good obviously is false because there isn't any. If I think I'm taking care of her, I've just finitized and materialized her and myself. Do you see that it's really hard?
But within that experience, in this experience and this dance that we have in the Leelaa, part of my dance is my family.
Yes.
And within that dance,
yes, and you can take great joy from the dance.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know, and this thing of helping, you know, my father out is a wonderful experience. But it's not, as long as it's not something that see how good I am. Or
as long as that's not something that I'm doing.
Yeah. We like with the daughter, it's fertilizing and water.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. Right? We imbibe in what appears to be, but knowing that it is what appears to be.
Oh yeah, we're going to do something. I mean, you know, we're in the play, and we're playing the part, but the thing is, remember you're the actor, not the part. And remember that your mother or your daughter is really the actor, not the part. If you're really a good actor, I wish Eddie were here. If you're really a good actor, I suspect it's very important not to forget that you're acting. You would lose all your technique and all your method and everything else. If you really got sucked into the part, then you might have an emotional reaction to what one of the other people on the stage was saying, you know? So the fact is that you have to remember that you're an actor and that they're actors and not, and then while your role is portraying emotion, you're remembering your method and the technique, and you're remembering that it's all absolutely impersonal in reality, and that nothing real, that the entire scene that's taking place is not real. Yes? No? Maybe?
So the Leelaa then is
completely unreal.
Completely.
Completely, I'm sorry, what did you say, Joe?
Unreal.
Completely unreal.
But since we're in it, or at least I choose to be in it, then embracing the dance is not resistant to enlightenment or spiritual growth. It's just being able to enjoy it.
That's right, unless you think I'm embracing it.
Right.
It's a little I thought that's keeping you locked in. That's all. Just that one thought, just the I thought, the idea that there's a little I.
How do you know, though? I mean, it's a fine line. Is that why you want to break yourself out of patterns? Because it's easy when you're in patterns to self-justify. Like, so is it like breaking yourself out of the patterns and not doing this and doing that and just being kind of... But then you're in the I again, thinking about it.
We'll talk about practices now, and when we get to self-inquiry, the answer becomes clear. The fact is to forget all that and drop the I.
Yeah.
If I put myself into this, or God and I put myself into this life to learn certain lessons, don't I need to learn them in the small I? Or is the lesson that I need to get out of the small I the whole time, and until I get that I won't learn the lesson?
There's lots of little lessons to be learned along the way, and the small I is learning all the lessons. Yes. But the real lesson to be learned is that there is no small I, and never was.
Will I, every time I come into a life, will I have to relearn that particular lesson?
No, everything you solve spiritually stays solved forever.
So when you're in God consciousness, there's no favorites, per se, because that's your consciousness. So, as much as we love our children, that consciousness is there. I love you, because that's just that expression.
Yeah, we might well take care of our children because that's the role we're playing.
But we see that as the role.
Yeah, I'm playing mom or I'm playing dad, and my job is to take care of God as my kid.
So our job's here just to get the God in here, and the rest will follow.
Our job is to realize God, realize the presence of God. Okay, yeah.
One of the things I heard, and I found this true to be truth in my experience, is that one of the things I heard on Joel's tape was it's harder to, it's easier to stay in a higher, like to get to a higher place and stay there than to be at a certain level and drop back down again. And he talks about how it's hard to climb back up. And I'm just wondering, and I found that to be true to whatever extent I've experienced that in my own experience, like almost like an awareness of, like what you're talking about here, of being a certain level and then can see myself getting back into the human consciousness and then all the problems that come along with that. I've seen that, and it's really clear to me. But then it also can be clear and also be like an observer, like watching myself, be at that level and not being able to get to the place where, to another place again. And so I'm just wondering, do you have any explanation of why that is? That it's harder to come back up, or have you heard that before or experienced that?
It's not really harder to get back up the second time than it was the first time. We get high and then script brings us back down in a word. Our scripts and our resistance behaviors and all that nonsense brings us back down. And often we can watch that happening. The other thing that brings us back down is just human consciousness, the fact that we're immersed in human consciousness and not taking care of ourselves on a not only daily basis and protective work like Joel talks about, but a minute-to-minute basis, really, confronting every appearance of disharmony with a nonsense type work. Being in human consciousness brings us back down. But however we got up there to begin with will work again when we're ready to do it. All right, let's start into the practices. There's a bunch of practices here, and let's proceed through it as hard as we get, but let's talk about each one a bit. Go ahead, please. We're starting over again.
Practices. There are innumerable obstacles to attaining enlightenment. We've mentioned just a few of the more deeply conditioned ones. So how do we overcome them and attain spiritual consciousness? There are several practices there are several practices that will help us raise our level of consciousness. We'll mention a few that have been proven effective.
Being around higher consciousness. Since there's only one consciousness and only one mind, we are affected by those around us. It's depressing to hang out with people who are depressed and joyful to be with people who are full of joy. Similarly, it's spiritually uplifting to be with people who realize more than we do. Being tuned into human consciousness is what has conditioned us and is keeping us conditioned. Being in the consciousness of a person who is fully realized is the most powerful tool available for lifting us out of the hypnotism.
Question. So, if there is no other power, then why am I depressed hanging out with people who are depressed?
You're in their consciousness, and there is a power where God is not realized. If you were walking in there and you were in God consciousness, you would not be depressed being in a room full of depressed. You'd probably lift them right out of it.
Right.
But most of us walk in there sort of cross-eyed and human and open and available to everything that's being broadcast at us. So somebody gets angry at us and our anger comes up, and it is depressing to hang out with depressing people unless you're high enough not to. If you look at the depressed people and say, oh, look at that silly piece of hypnotism in the Leelaa, then you're totally unaffected by it, see? But if you see them as depressed, it will be depressing.
But even that can be a trick, can't it? Because like you could sit in judgment of it. You have to almost see beyond that. It's not like Joel's like the nothinizing of it.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
If you label it hypnotism, if you see it as hypnotism, then it's powerless over you. Because it takes a spiritual adult to label it hypnotism.
Not identifying them with the down that you see.
Oh, look, his role is depressed. He's acting depressed.
Well, I was just kind of thinking when you get sober and then you get enough God consciousness in gear to then work with somebody who's less sober than you are and lift them. I mean, that's at a really simple level. You don't have to be, that's why you don't do it in your first 10 days. You don't go out to a drunk who's drinking. But once you've got that, it's easy to...
Why do we tell people that they got to change their playmates? Quit hanging out with the people you used to be hanging out with. Why do we tell them that? So that we don't know why, most of us, but the reason is because if you stay in the old consciousness, you're going to keep up the old behavior.
Yeah.
And if you move into a new consciousness, you don't have to. AA works because of the consciousness in AA that knows that we don't have to, that we cannot drink today, and we don't have to, that we don't have to drink today.
But in terms of the work that specifically we're doing, it's not about removing ourselves from the situations that are disturbing to us necessarily, but about knowing the truth about them.
It's about knowing, exactly, yes. Yeah. You go to the meeting and know the truth. Go to the meeting and you observe the script events and you observe the resistance behaviors and you see the disharmony and you see the suffering and you know the truth. Just simply know it's hypnotism.
To whatever degree that you're judging or reacting, that's your humanhood.
And you're available too. So it really is true. If I walk into a room full of depressed people, I will get depressed. If I walk into a room full of people who are acting depressed, I may applaud the performance.
Right.
You see?
It acts upon you to the degree that you believe in it.
You buy it, yeah.
You buy it.
Yeah. The lies only have power if they're believed. Please.
Along that same lines, and you kind of touched upon it, but wouldn't, I guess, even you talked about seeing them as acting depressed, but wouldn't trying to see the I in them, which you're saying, seeing the truth, like seeing that I, and that people are raised to that level when you see that, and I heard and experienced that, really trying to look at people and see that to where they recognize it in themselves.
Yeah, if you're powerful enough, if you can realize it clearly enough, you can lift them out of that.
But that maybe would be, is that the next step? Maybe if you're just, like the next
step, or like you're saying, to just start with acting, seeing that they're playing that role, if you can't get to the point where you're maybe seeing.
Just know whatever truth you can know about it. I would say know the highest truth you can know about it.
Okay.
But reciting the fact that that's God there isn't going to do shit.
Right, if you don't believe that. Right.
But perhaps you are able to realize that, well, there's a really hypnotized person, you know, without going to the extent to, I mean, you might be able to buy the fact that human consciousness is radiating depressing thoughts without going so far as recognizing the fact that you're looking at God incarnate. Okay, you see, one might be easier for you than the other,
but wouldn't seeing them, even as acting depressed, seeing them as coming from some kind of lack or disharmony or like malpracticing them, isn't like even seeing them using the word depressed as, isn't that kind of, I don't know, seeing them as lacking something?
Not if I know they aren't.
Oh, okay.
Spiritual beings having human experiences.
What I'm seeing is human consciousness. I'm seeing an ignorant person. An undeveloped person, okay? A person at wherever they are spiritually, okay? So they still have some ignorance in them. And therefore they're susceptible to human consciousness, to use them to manifest the belief in the very depressing beliefs in human consciousness. So here's a guy, and the only error this guy made is he failed to recognize what was going on. So no, I don't think he's depressed, but I think he's acting depressed. I think he thinks he's depressed. I think he's hypnotized. And hanging out with higher people makes you higher. That's the point of this. Let's go on. Next person.
I was once blessed with sitting in front of Osho for 5 or 10 minutes while he told me a Sufi story. I was transformed. The immediate result was that I completely lost the next 20 minutes. 1 minute I was in front of him. The next instant, to me, I was sitting in the middle of a bunch of dancing, how do you pronounce that? Sannyasins. Darshan was over. There had been several waiting behind me for their minutes with Osho, but they were through, and the live music and dancing was in full swing.
The next result, I noticed that when I came to the celebration a few days later, I saw his car arriving out of the corner of my eye, and my heart burst with love. Prior to that moment, I realized I had not known what love was. During those 5 or 10 minutes, he had cracked the heart open like a walnut. I spent the next 9 years back here in the States letting the rest of what I had happened to me during those few minutes unfold. It led me to encountering Robert Adams, my second guru. I took one look at him and my deepest center said, "Oh bleep." I recognized him as another Osho, and I knew that I had just lost my chance of survival. He looked and laughed, and I knew I was his. He knew I was his.
So that's what 5 or 10 minutes with enlightened masters can do. Being with the consciousness.
Okay, it's just an amazing, there's just no question, and it's stated in the Upanishads and everywhere, that if you're with an enlightened master, it's the single most powerful thing for lifting you. And yet, the really enlightened masters, like Jesus, didn't lift anybody into enlightenment. None of his disciples were enlightened. Paul got it down the pike, and John got it 90 years later, but the 12, none of them got enlightened. So even with that powerful a force, it takes a while. They were only with him for 2 or 3 years. Go ahead.
Being with a consciousness that appears within the Leelaa to be higher than ours is an uplifting experience. So going where the consciousness is higher is an excellent practice for attaining higher consciousness. Also, being in a community of people who are working on raising their consciousness rather than spending time with those who are immersed in human consciousness will help a great deal in breaking down our conditioning.
So that's just one practice. Hang out with the high people. Go get high. None of you guys should have any trouble with getting high. I mean, come on. You're my crowd.
Yeah.
That's why I go to the Tony Titchell thing when he's here in January. I get high over there, you know? Okay, next.
Learning the letter of truth. Another important tool for lifting ourselves above the encumbrances of human consciousness is what Joel called learning the letter of truth. Even though truth cannot be expressed, many true things can be said about the nature of what is and what appears to be, and the rest can be pointed at. Joel began recording his classes in 1950 and discovered that, to a significant extent, the consciousness of the speaker was transmitted on the tapes to the listeners. Considering the omnipresence of individual consciousness, it is not difficult to understand that an enlightened consciousness is omnipresent and is available to the tape listener to the extent that he or she can tune in. Joel demonstrated the omnipresence of his consciousness when he healed people who were physically 10,000 miles away, even before he received their request by mail. So of course he could be with those who were listening to the tapes.
The same thing holds true when written words, either transcriptions of talk or original work. Any of Joel's, Robert's, or Osho's books or tapes is uplifting because of the consciousness of the master. It should be obvious that the author of the work being listened to or read is critical. Don't waste time on discussions or explanations of the works of masters. We want the master's consciousness, not some intellectual. If the work was in another language, that introduces a level of indirection. The consciousness of the translator is almost as important as that of the master.
That's important. Translating stuff like the works of Zen masters. You know, you can't possibly translate something like Sosan's writing unless you're a Zen master. You can't possibly, because it's all finger pointing, you know, then you're going to wind up describing the hand again, you know. I mean, he's using words and you pick words. We had an interesting experiment at the RAND Corporation. They were doing working on English to Russian translating machines and Russian to English translating machines, and they had a pretty good set of dictionaries that translated back and forth pretty well, but they were trying to get into the idiom, and somebody dropped in steak and vodka, body and soul, and it translated into Russian, and it translated back, and it got back as steak and vodka. The fact, you know, soul went to spirit, and spirit went to vodka, and they knew there were pairs that go together, body and soul, so they got the fact that it was a pair, and over in Russia, apparently steak and vodka is that. So you see that an understanding translator may lose something. Go ahead.
Learning the letter of truth not only lifts us, it helps deprogram us. Hearing truth begins to point out all the incorrect beliefs we have been conditioned with. It begins to thin out the molasses our heads have been filled with, which has kept us stuck in our lives of suffering. As the molasses thickens, the faculties of awareness thins. As the molasses thins, the faculties of awarenesses, insight and intuition begin to open up. We arrive at the point where we can practice meditation, the art of opening a pipeline through the molasses to our own direct experience of truth.
Okay. So another technique is practice that's very important is learning the letter of truth, which I constantly lean on people to do. That's why there's all those books and tapes and such like in there. And that's why we're here, learning the letter. Exactly what we're doing tonight is learning the letter of truth. Okay?
Practicing the letter of truth. Joel says that the primary reason for practicing spiritual healing is not to rid people of some malady. Bringing temporary relief spiritually is not significantly different from a medical solution to the problem. If, however, the person has a healing and is able to maintain some of the spiritual altitude that she or he was lifted to, that's a step up. Another reason for healing work is that it is a carrot. It demonstrates that the truths being presented are true and leads some to want to gain the understanding of the principles by which they were healed. The most important benefit of practicing healing work comes to the practitioner. Practicing the healing principles every time we're tempted to accept the picture presented by human consciousness is a spiritual practice that will make the principles part of our consciousness rather than remaining the letter of truth in our intellects.
Okay? Now, that's the point, is that practicing the letter of truth is what gets it in there. And healing work is, and we'll talk about healing down the pike somewhere, I suppose, but practicing healing is a matter of regularly practicing these truths. But the other thing is that, and that's why I say that the script work will also do that, because if you practice the truth every time you have an emotion, which is a little more often than an opportunity to heal, you will be practicing the principles rather than reciting them or reading them in a book. Practicing the principles. You got to drop it from here down to here. You got to become the marrow of our bones. Yeah, let's keep going. We got time. We're doing pretty good here.
Meditation. Joel tells us that the fundamental tool is meditation. He introduced a specific step-by-step formula to the West, which he called contemplative meditation. First, we need to have some statements that remind us of the letter of truth that we've been learning. For him, they were quotations from Scripture, because he had had their truth revealed to him. For us, Scripture isn't necessarily an authority, so we have to find others, but whatever statements ring true to us do.
We take one of these pointers at truth into our consciousness and contemplate it. We just think about it, think about what it means,
I'm sorry, drop the it.
Okay, let our intellects play with it and explore it. Soon we'll begin to have new thoughts about this truth that we're playing with. To the extent that we have any sort of a window open through our molasses to ourselves, more truth will come to us. After a few minutes of contemplation, we may have a realization or a feeling of acceptance or a deepening understanding. Then there's often a window during which our minds are quiet, maybe just for a second or two or 5, maybe for a minute there's a period of quiet. This is the beginning of making contact with ourselves, of having a conscious realization of what is. During the moment of silence, we adopt an attitude of listening, waiting quietly to feel the presence or hear the still small voice. We're using the letter of truth, trying to open a little pike out through the molasses to ourselves, to get some more truth, to get a better sense of truth, until we get into a place just for this moment of peace, and in that peace we listen.
The listening is what Joel calls prayer. Let's deal with vocabulary for a moment. The word meditation is commonly used for both of the practice, meditating and the state of consciousness it leads to, so there's confusion. Joel uses the term contemplative meditation to talk about the practice, and the word prayer to talk about the moment of silence. For most people, prayer is a loaded word that has to do with asking God for things, so we'll use the phrase, sitting in the silence. We'll use a variety of specific names from contemplative meditation to vipassana for the practices.
The important thing is to get silent and receptive. Every time we get silent, even for a second or two, and listening, we are increasing our ability to feel the presence of what is. It is ourselves that have brought us to this work. The reason we're led to books like this is ourselves are bringing us to the next piece of information we need on our spiritual path. What we are really doing is listening to ourselves, trying to hear ourselves, trying to drop this personal sense of self, which is the lie, which is the Leelaa, which is the costume and mask that we are wearing.
The important statement was back there a minute ago. Every time we get into the silence and listen, we are increasing our awareness of the presence of what is. Okay? That's the practice. That's the point of meditation, is to get silent just for a moment, to get the mind to drop down completely and sit in the silence, which is what I call prayer, what Joel calls prayer. Sit in the silence and listen, or be aware of the presence, okay? And that's, being aware of the presence or sitting in the silence, and it's obviously here when we meditate together. And hopefully some of you are here feeling it. That's the presence, and that's what we want to increase. Okay?
It's usually far better to hold 20, 30-second practices a day in which we pause, remember the presence of what is in our lives, and listen. Go within. That's a total of 10 minutes in the day. Then to meditate for an hour in the morning. Probably 55 minutes of the hour will be wasted with mind chatter. Remembering who we really are 20 times a day is much more effective in building our spiritual muscle.
Lee, isn't that one of the reasons that Barbara and that you're going to be using flashcards as part of that, being able to take something, something that stops you if you have it in front of you a few times a day to put you in that place?
Yeah, that's a practice.
It's a practice.
That's like practicing the principles. It's not to get you into the silence, it's to confront a situation directly with truth.
But is that what like you're talking about here, stopping a few, that can take you into a minute of stopping.
That's not the purpose of it, to drop you into the silence.
Okay.
All these are methods for getting into the silence. That's a method for remembering truth that's a method for breaking hypnosis.
Okay.
There are really two practices here. First, contemplative meditation is contemplating a truth until the mind grows silent, then listening for as long as the mind is silent, and then getting up and going on about our business. This is a good way to begin and end our days. Second, practicing the presence is pausing frequently throughout the day to go within. We can develop tricks to remember to go within.
Some of us call them stupid God tricks.
For example, we can use walking out the door to remind us to go within. So the presence of what is, rather than universal human belief, will determine our experience as we go out into the world. When the phone rings, we could go within for a second before we answer it to remember that an expression of what is on the phone, not a human being. When we get into the car, we might pause just for a second and reach for the presence and remember who's driving all the cars on the freeway, including ours. This will bring about a much better experience than driving with a bunch of humans who are not paying attention or who are on their cell phones or drunk or all the above. The freeway flows much better if what is driving all the vehicles, which it is if you realize it, and which it isn't if you don't.
So, you get the point about practicing the presence and the point about contemplative meditation. Okay? The real purpose of practicing the presence is to just really quickly look for a break. Just pause for 30 seconds, and that might be an alternate use of the flashcard, but just pause for 30 seconds and remember some truth that you've chosen to work with, and maybe you can get quiet for a second or two or five, and then go on, And this is a real easy thing to practice, between classes if you're teaching or, and it's amazing how your experience of the day will change.
I was just going to say, and I kind of answered in there, but I noticed that sometimes that I just, I've tried to practice both, but sometimes I notice I just have to sit there sometimes, and I guess that's the contemplative and let my mind quiet down until I get that, that little click, which sometimes it doesn't come, and I realize it's better to get up and do something else and then come back to it, and that seems to work, or do some writing, but yeah, sometimes I find that it's just to sit there, like in the morning, especially in the morning before I leave and do anything else until I get that, that seems to work, and sometimes it doesn't come.
Yeah. Once you have mastered meditation to the point where you can feel the presence, then it's really stupid to go out the door in the morning without having felt the presence. Okay? Until then, it's all muscle building, and you do that for whatever time you have and keep at it. Joel, after his enlightenment experience, after becoming a spiritual healer, several years later, was, I don't know how many, 2 or 3 years later maybe, was told that the method was to use meditation. And God told him, you need to learn how to meditate and teach your people meditation. And Joel thought that was a good idea, and so he studied about meditation and learned what it was. And then he practiced it regularly, which means for him all day, every day, for 8 months before he made the first contact. And when he died, he was actually experiencing the presence, actively focused on it probably 95% of the time, and always there was a little piece back here that was aware of the presence of God. So he went from one glimpse after 8 months to 100% to, praying without ceasing, as it says in the New Testament. That's the game. Let's see, I think, yeah, we're far enough. Let's talk about whatever we want to talk about now. That we won't go any further tonight, but we can discuss these methods or questions or.
Question.
Yes, please.
In another chakra, he talked about doing meditation alive, and that the higher his consciousness became, the less sleep he needed. And then I was reading something from the Bhagwan Gita or whatever 2 days ago that did the same thing. What is higher consciousness? There seems to be a thing that higher consciousness means you need less sleep.
Yeah, it was certainly Joel's experience. Joel only slept for 3 or 4 hours a night.
Why?
Well, first of all, they're not saying that you need less rest. Joel rested for 7 or 8 hours. It takes 7 or 8 hours or 6 or whatever it takes for your body to restore itself. There's a physical process going on, and I know that if you're really high, there's no physical process going on. But for most of us, there's a process going on, and muscles need to flush out the poisons. And there's the reason we sleep is so that your body can flush itself out and restore itself. Okay. Another reason that human beings need to sleep is so that they can get into the REM sleep and so they can dream, because people go crazy if they can't dream. And see, that's no longer a problem for a person that's really high. They don't need to dream. And if you get really high, like Robert or Osho or people like that, they're aware always. They're aware that the body's asleep. They never lose awareness, because because the fact is that what's really aware is the consciousness, which contains the body. And Robert, for instance, sometimes would get confused as to whether he was dreaming or having a vision or awake, because they were all the same to him. They were just different kinds of dreams or visions or what have you. So he was never quite sure. He'd talk about, I had a vision the other night, and somebody said, was that a dream? He was never quite sure whether it was really a dream or a vision, or whether he was really asleep or not, because all of that's totally irrelevant to him. So for Robert, sleep was, he parked his body for 6 hours, and then he invited us to join him. He says, I meditate twice in the evening, and you can join in the evening, he says, or twice a day. He says, so that you can join me, because it's more powerful if you meditate with me. He says, one of those periods is from 3 to 6 in the morning, and the other one is from 9 o'clock or something or other, So Robert, he was really always meditating. So, at different levels, it looks entirely different.
It seems to me that the less you're identified with the human consciousness, the less stress you experience as well. And stress eats up energy.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. Yeah, stress is entirely human consciousness induced, self-induced.
Whenever we read stuff like this, what I always hear is like, you just need to be quiet more. Because it's almost like the more I talk to people, the further in human consciousness I get.
That's right.
Even people who are doing this work, it's, you know what I mean? It's just really hard to not talk about the human experience and all the conditions of the human experience. Yeah.
That's right.
The more you talk about it, the more you believe it, the more you're in it, the more you're influenced by it.
Yeah. Talking about this is really pretty non-constructive, and it does keep your mind chattering. I mean, the fact is, you heard what you've heard, and that's what you heard, and the fact that the person sitting next to you heard the same words, they've heard something entirely differently. Exactly. And you've heard what you're supposed to hear, and they've heard what they're supposed to hear. And if you start discussing it, why, maybe one of you will talk the other one out of what they were supposed to hear. You know, who knows what there's no future in discussing it. And being right about what you heard is especially difficult, but you're exactly right. There's no reason to talk about this.
It's kind of a resistance behavior talking about it because you're trying to fix someone, or one, you're trying to justify it's almost a resistance behavior.
Or at best, you're trying to use your intellect to get a deeper understanding.
Yeah.
And that's the wrong tool. You want to hear it, not listen.
Well, I didn't mean just talking about this. I mean talking about anything.
I understand,
right.
But I'm saying even about this work. But yeah, certainly chattering about anything. It's just amazing what people will talk about. I'm just endlessly amazed. I have great fun going over to the morning meeting, and I go over there early and listen to everybody's talking, and nothing's being said. When I was in Pune, in one of the groups I was in, they told us the free Sufi requirements on controlling your tongue, the watchman of the portal of your mouth, they said. And one is that before you say anything, make sure it's true. And okay, I can do that, The second one is, before you say anything, make sure it's kind. Okay, that's a little harder, but I can do that. And the third is, before you say anything, make sure it's necessary.
Everything else.
And suddenly 95% of your conversation drops away. Or another way they put it is, don't say anything that, tomorrow, let's all try this. Tomorrow, don't say anything that could possibly be construed as self-serving.
Hang on a minute here now.
Don't say anything that anybody could read as you're being self-serving, including yourself. Don't say anything that's in any way could be construed as self-serving.
How do I order a cheeseburger?
Better eat at home before you leave. Better eat at home before you leave.
You have to go to the checkout that's the machine too, right?
Oh, yeah.
How do you go on a job interview?
Don't go tomorrow.
You certainly could go there and just answer the questions directly. Of course, he might conceive of it as self-serving. Maybe you shouldn't do a job interview tomorrow.
We'll cancel your review for tomorrow.
It's gonna be good, right?
No, that's a tough challenge, but just trying to say, the easier one is to not say anything that's untrue, unkind, or unnecessary. That will knock out 95% of your conversation.
What do you teach in grammar school?
It's necessary as a teacher, to teach.
Mm-hmm.
That's your job. That's necessary.
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily. That's right. Some of it is.
Not in our schools of thinking.
Well, and then I think about the guy that, when we were at Robert's, when Robert talked about how he never locked his car and he never had anything stolen, and the guy that said, well, I tried that yesterday and everything was ripped off out of my car, and Robert said, because you're not at that state of consciousness yet. you were trying to be where I was and you're not there. So part of it is...
He didn't even say that.
Well, he said something like that.
What he said is, I didn't tell you not
Right.
to lock your car.
But I mean,
You correctly got the
but I
reason
mean,
for it.
part of that is, you know, to keep these things as I don't want to say ideals or goals but also you can't do stuff. I mean, practice, but you can't really do stuff if you're not there yet consciously.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean? You can practice it. I don't know. You can. It's in the awareness. It's in watching yourself, I think, and being aware of what you're doing.
Yeah, you certainly don't want to bet your life on a truth you haven't demonstrated yet.
Right.
But you can certainly get radical in your practice.
Absolutely.
I guess if you thought about locking your car, you're not there.
So if there's no point in talking about it, the value of being here is just to be mostly in the consciousness. Would we just be just as served by sitting here and meditating for an hour then? Or getting silent?
Well, we're also learning the letter of truth. So you're hearing statements that presumably are true, and you're getting some understanding of them, and you have an opportunity to deepen your understanding by asking the questions that are appropriate for you. But there's certainly no reason then to discuss it with somebody else who may be considerably further down the path or considerably behind you in the path. And you know, all of this stuff, if we all come back in January and read this book again, it'll be totally different, even if I don't change a word. Because we'll have gotten enough out of this reading that we hear it entirely differently next time. Okay? And what we hear each time is correct. It's the next thing we need to know, you know. This pointing at the moon stuff, you know, you can always hear more and more every time you read it. So two different people sitting side by side will both hear what they need to hear, but it may be quite different. It may even be mutually contradictory. I used to love listening to Robert. Sometimes he would be asked the same question by 3 different people in the same satsang and give 3 different answers, totally different answers, which were mutually exclusive, because he was answering each person at the level they were at, you know. Yeah. And the English language is just too ambiguous. You start talking about I, you know, different levels of I and different levels of stuff, so it's not constructive to intellectually try to ascertain what somebody else learned about this, or to make sure you're right, or to, you know, and why else would you talk about it except to make sure that you both got it, or, you know, usually counterproductive, I think.
Is that what the principle of spiritual secrecy, that kind of why we have that principle is there?
Yes, it relates. You know, it's for exactly the same reason that you could lose your understanding, because somebody with a stronger personality may tell you, well, no, that meant this. And that's what it meant to them, but that's not what it meant to you. Let's grab the silence. Okay, thank you. Love y'all. See you next week.